Anton Chekhov never published philosophical works on its own. However, his stories and plays have very deep philosophical ideas, about which I'm going to talk now. Anton Pavlovich Chekhov is a Russian 19th century playwright and short story writer. His plays are revolutionary, even though they are called comedies. More often than not, they are depressive and sad, while his short stories are focused on suffering of characters and possess evil irony, sometimes even unprincipled. So you could better understand the spirit of the works. I provided a quote from one of the plays. "What a fine weather today. Can choose whether to drink tea or to hang myself." If he's so depressive and evil, why should we read him? It might sound like a reasonable question. I would say, as I guess most readers of him would say, that it is not unprincipled, it's not evil. It is his works are rather explicit, and Anton Chekhov has courage to show things and characters as they are, so that reader could, like under the microscope, analyze the consequences of possession of certain flaws and virtues, and see what these virtues can lead to. Additionally, his works are distinguished by the fact that characters are ordinary people. So you will not see there some extraordinary people, like very privileged, or on the other side, some desperate poor people, like, for example, in Dostoevsky works. No, there's ordinary people who are at their point of life because of their decisions and who are quite free to make decisions to change their life. Additionally, he doesn't put any moral judgment. We will not see any conclusion in his works, because he leaves this to the reader to draw a conclusion and to decide what the character should have done differently, if he or she should have done differently. And this, as I said, allows us to analyze the very real characters and the consequences of their decisions, and see some philosophical ideas. His works have a lot of branches, a lot of themes. For example, boredom, conflict with time, failure of communication. In today's presentation, I will focus on a person out of place, a person which is not where he or she is supposed to be, but he or she is there because of their not correct, so to say, decisions and in the past. And through this branch, I will discover his philosophical ideas. And I already read quite some research from Chekhov scientists, and most often he is compared to these philosophers, Friedrich Nietzsche, Ernst Becker, and so on and so forth. And most often his ideas are called existential. I provided the definition of existentialism here from Britannica, even though I will not talk about existentialism and so on in this presentation, because his works, as well as the author himself, is too broad to be put into a frame of just one philosophical flow. Moreover, it's going to be a mistake, because existentialism is 20th century philosophies, while Chekhov lived in the 19th century. But his ideas have something similar with existentialism, which, as you can read here, is philosophies which are somewhat focused on interpretation of human existence in the world. So let's start, and I will focus on a Dreary Story as an example. And long story short, it is a story about 62 years old medical professor Nikolai Stepanovich, who suffers from some disease which causes insomnia. He has sleepless nights during which he overthinks and figures out that there is discrepancy between symbolic self and actual self. He is an honored professor. He has a lot of publications. His name is often put in newspapers. However, he barely makes ends meet. He is unhappy. His wife doesn't. He doesn't find his wife smart, and his family in general he doesn't find it satisfactory. He is not happy about his work anymore, and he starts to think what happened to him, what illness made to him. He shares these thoughts with his stepdaughter, the only person he could be honest to, and she says, well, no, it's not the illness. Your life has always been miserable. You just opened your eyes now. Of course, he doesn't agree, and then after a couple of days, he understands that she was right. There is no general idea in his life, and he spent 62 years in vain, and he doesn't know what to do next, and there is no further development. At the end of the story, he doesn't die, but it is clear from the previous passages that he will die, suffering from the thought that his life was meaningless. So here, now I want to make this short story long and focus on particular points in the story, which are very specific to Chekhov's. First of all, it is point of growth. Chekhov's characters at some point confront existential despair. So they live their life, they somehow live their life, not happily, but not very sadly, and then they understand that they don't have meaning in their life, and they don't know what to do next. It is the point of growth, after which, if they decide to develop and reject their inauthentic model of life, they will grow. Otherwise, they would sink deeper and deeper into boredom and dissatisfaction. The same thing happened to Nikolai Stepanovich in A Dreary Story. What particularly happened to him was what is called partialisation. So Nikolai Stepanovich was too focused on demands of his family, on fulfilling expectations of society, that he suppressed his emotion and genuine self. So he knew that he should be a professor. He knew that he should send, for example, money to his children, even though they are egoistic and maybe do not deserve them. He knew that, but he thought that expectations of society which he must have fulfilled. And by this way, he suppressed himself and didn't live this life. He tries to save himself in face of science. And this is very specific to Chekhov, because Chekhov believes that indeed faith in science and critical thinking are very important in one's life, but they cannot fulfill one's life if one doesn't feel oneself. So to say, if one doesn't feel one's emotions and genuine self. Same happens here to Nikolai Stepanovich. Faith in science doesn't save him, and then he realized that his life are just some random pieces which cannot be put into a coherent puzzle. And this is a quote from his monologue at quite very end of the story. He agrees that he should have known himself. So he says, know thyself is excellent and useful advice. It is only a pity that the ancients never thought to indicate the means of following this precept. So he agrees that he should have rejected his inauthentic model, but he doesn't know how to do this. And it is apparently too late. So from this story and from other stories which I read, I tried to carefully put some important philosophical ideas from his work in this sentence, although I do not pretend and I do not want to say that this is the only philosophical ideas of Chekhov, of course not, but I find these topics important, these points important in his works. So one must know oneself, live authentic life, taking responsibility for one's actions, and embracing one's true desires. And here are some other works from Chekhov which have very similar idea which fall on the very similar branch, the person not in his place. I will not talk about them now, but just if you want, you can read it. Something like, if you like this story, you will also like these three. And here are the sources which I used in this presentation. Thank you for your attention.